We'll get started here. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. And thank you, Scott, for joining us. And, we're looking forward to your amazing lecture. Welcome to 16th episode of Dental Business Pod. This is a periodic live dental business webinar with industry experts like Scott here, brought to you by Song Dental Partners. Here we share the key knowledge for practice management while learning from the expert. My name is Dr. Jonathan Song. I'm a wet-finger general dentist in Southern California. I currently own and operate 3 dental practices in Los Angeles and Orange County area, and I'm in the process of making my own dental ecosystem to benefit from and share the DSO level services for private practices, which includes the organized ownership and management of diversified dental office types, and dental lab services, HR services, reporting and accounting and IT, and a lot more. There's a lot of business going on here. We plan to grow to 10 million total revenue with 5 private offices by 2026. It's getting pretty close without compromising ethics and clinical quality in Southern California. I'm recording my journey so we can all learn from it. So stay tuned for all the ups and downs of this crazy attempt. With the speaker's permission, the recordings will be available in our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@songdentalpartners. Please share, subscribe, like, and comment so we can keep evolve this platform and provide more value to more people by bringing many more amazing guests like Scott. Just to go over some housekeeping rules, please type your questions in the chat so we can make sure to cover that at the end if we don't cover it during the lecture. Speakers' contact info can be found at our YouTube episode in the channel or my website, or Scott will share at the end here. And when you contact the speaker, please let them know where that you saw him at the webinar. So today we have Scott Stewart here from Clifton Associates, who is graciously offering his expertise and time tonight. And I will read his bio here. Scott Stewart, after getting his degree in business management, Scott went to work for Marriott Hotels and was soon recruited away by a small dental consulting company in 1991. In 1994, he founded Clifton Associates, a coaching firm that works exclusively with dental practices in Southern California. He has worked with more than 500 dental practices, developing business plans, coaching and training dental teams, developing leadership skills, enhancing communication skills, training teams on customer service, improving practice systems, and successfully helping practices grow to new levels of productivity and profitability. In addition to being the primary trainer of his company's in-office coaching programs, he helps dentists with due diligence, practice evaluations, and transitions, and speaks regularly for aesthetic professional, numerous dental societies, study clubs, and specialists throughout Southern California. His company has been accredited with the California State Board since 2000 and has hosted continuing education courses on a variety of clinical and practice management topics. I've talked to a lot of the people in the industry, like brokers, lawyers, and accountants. They've all spoke really, really highly of Scott, so I'm really, really glad that he's here. Scott, you can take it away.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's good to be here. Good to have you guys. I can't really see the entire screen of attendees. So I want to say that it looks like there's about 15, something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. And not sure if we have any specialists. Maybe Jonathan, you can probably see them all. If anybody could raise their hand if you're a specialist, I'd just kind of like to know my audience. Are they most of them generals? Or do you see any specialists that are raising their hands?
I think they're all general right now.
All generals. Okay, great. Well, welcome to this evening. We're going to talk about employee management. I jokingly say the fun part of doing dentistry. All right, something is wrong here with my advancement. There we go. Again, thank you, Jonathan, for having me. It's good to be a part of this. You pretty much said everything there is about me. I would prefer someone else say it than me, But like he said, I've been in dentistry for this is now my 35th year in dentistry. I did start when I was 12, so
Well,
I'm joking. I'm joking. Um, you said it. I've worked in over 500 dental practices. I've worked in probably every kind of dental practices. I've worked in Denti-Cal offices. I've worked in HMO offices. I've taken people out of network and worked in out of network practices. Seems like the vast majority of practices today are kind of blended PPOs and the like. And just about everything that goes on in the business of dentistry is fair game for my coaching. I field a lot of calls about employee related issues. And so this is a most appropriate topic. So if any of you don't have your own practice yet, like Jonathan said, I do due diligence and transitions for buyers in Southern California. I'm not sure if we have anyone. Do you know, Jonathan, if we have anyone from out of state? Could you raise your hand if you're out of state? Or
I believe there's one person from East Coast.
one person from the East Coast? Okay. Well, it's good to hear you. Good to have you with us. Some of what I'm going to say, really, there are a few points that will apply really more so to California. So be conscientious of that. All right. So please add me as a contact. If you would like, you're certainly welcome to text me or email me questions, derogatory thoughts. I'm joking. But please certainly add me as a contact. If I can answer questions or help you in the future, I'd be happy to talk with you. So let's get on with this. We're going to talk about 5 main areas of employee management. We're going to talk about screening and hiring employees. We're going to talk about compensation plans, responsibilities and expectations, employee communication, and leadership. Might not like that part. Leadership. All right, here we go. So where do we find good employees? These are the kinds of questions that I get all the time. Where do I find good ones? How much should I pay them? Doctors that are complaining to me about employees that aren't doing their job and they're pulling their hair out. What is the problem? And of late, meaning the last 4 years, 5 years now, when is there going to be stability in the job market? And why are employees asking for so much? COVID did a number on healthcare in general. I have a daughter that's a nurse, and hospitals are short-staffed with respect to nurses. Healthcare in general is short-staffed. Dentistry is short-staffed. A lot of people left healthcare and dentistry during COVID, and quite frankly, I thought that we would be back up to speed by now, but we certainly aren't. There is still a massive shortage. And this is simple economics, supply and demand. When the supply is low, the demand is high, and so are the prices. So there's no doubt that it's like this. Now, I can't really speak to other parts of the country and what goes on there. I only work in Southern California. This is my backyard and my area, so it could be different elsewhere. And my experience has been that there really isn't ever going to be a perfect time to, pour your energy into your employees, to a perfect time to find employees. It may not ever be, like the slide says, rainbows and butterflies, but there are a lot of preventive measures that can be taken to improve the situation with employees, and understand that, the business of dentistry has a group of people in it that work with you as doctors that are predominantly female. And many times females get married and have children and go off to be moms, and that just brings attrition. And then sometimes people decide they're going to change careers, and that brings attrition. And then sometimes people aren't what you want them to be, and they get fired, and that brings attrition. So it's not, it's good for a little while, and if it's good for you right now, I hope it's good for you right now. And I hope you have lots of years of stability with respect to staffing, but it doesn't ever stay the same forever. That's the reality of it. So let's talk about hiring employees. what I want to say first about this is know what you're looking for. Understand the staffing model. I see people hire from a place of desperation without any comprehension or sometimes commitment to who they really need in their practice. So, in a general dental practice, there are three jobs predominantly. There's hygiene recall coordinator, there's money, what I call financial coordinator or a biller, and there's treatment coordinating. And there are many tasks within all of these jobs. And I've worked in practices where one person does all three jobs, smaller offices, and I've been in practices. I think one time I worked in an office that had 10,000 active patients, and they had 7 people that worked up in the front. So obviously, depending on the size of a practice and the caliber of an individual, that's going to influence the number of people that one would need. In the back, one doctor who is most likely the owner, a couple of dental assistants. Let's say that they've got double hygiene. The number of days of hygiene is obviously dependent upon the number of active patients. A fast rule of thumb there is about 1 day of hygiene for every 200 active patients. And that doesn't really account for SRPs and new patients. So if those are healthy numbers, it could be a little more than 1 day per 200. So my experience has been that one doctor with 2 dental assistants checking double hygiene is pretty much about as full as a person can be to keep up with a general schedule. Um, I have worked with a few doctors that check triple hygiene, and they are running, let me tell you. Um, do you need one assistant or 2 assistants? I would tell you that it's about 1 or 2% of the doctors that I've worked with through my years that don't have a dental assistant. It's an isolate and they work alone, and that's great. More power to them. But I would say it's about a 50-50 split after that, is in terms of whether a doctor wants 1 or 2. That's a personal preference, has to do with the volume. It has to do with how you as a practitioner want to practice. So it's not really for me to tell a dentist whether they need a second assistant. That is generally something they tell me first. I can pretty much tell, but it's a personal preference. So we move up from there. I mean, we could do that gradually, and we could add a couple of people, add a second doctor. But when you get to certain levels where there are multiple owners and layers of management, multiple people in the front doing the same job, multiple hygiene coordinators, greeters, treatment coordinators, billers, or sometimes that's outsourced. That's very popular today. Nothing wrong with that either. Um, Multiple dentists, depending on how many dentists are on board at any given time, that would also dictate how many assistants are needed. So it's important to understand how many people you need. My experience is that, job sharing and having part-time people, um, I'm, I was one of those kind of part-time people when I was in college, and I was good at my job, but not everybody's got the same work ethic. And I've seen people that are part-time that they may have a work ethic that's good, but they may be more committed to raising a family or going to school. And that doesn't always fulfill the needs of what goes on in a dental practice. And so, again, let me say that very tongue in cheek, part-time people based on how good they are and how well they do their job, how committed they are, how professional they are. So it can work, but my experience has been that more often than not, full-time people have a tendency to produce greater continuity in a practice. And that's generally better for most offices. So it's an important thing to understand your staffing model, because I have a client right now who is missing a couple of people, and from a place of desperation, she wants to hire someone part-time. I want to hire a part-time dental assistant. I'm like, well, you don't need a part-time dental assistant. You need a full-time dental assistant. And, sometimes when we're grasping at straws, anything seems like it's going to help, but that might not be the best decision in the long run. If one was going to hire someone, it might be better to hire them temporarily of course, until you find really exactly what fits your model. All right. In terms of knowing what you need, first, the skill set matters as well. Are the individuals that you're looking for, are you looking for technical skills, clinical skills? Do you want certain levels of certification or licensing? Do you want people that have strong social skills, verbal skills, math skills? I worked in an office one time where the treatment coordinator, who has to present the financial portion of the treatment plan, says to me out loud, "I'm not very good with math." I'm like, "You need to be good with math. That's a pretty important part of this job." And then another aspect of that is, how much experience do you want? People that have a lot more experience generally cost more. Um, so know the skill set of the individuals that you want, that are going to suit your needs in your practice. Personalities matter. My experience with this has been, I'm not suggesting that you give personality profile tests to prospective employees, but if you understand personality types, then that can be beneficial when you're talking to people. I've taught this enough to be able to pick up pretty quickly on people's personality types. And, they certainly do affect things in the office. They affect the patients, they affect coworkers. So this is the DISC profile system that's very popular, been around for a lot of years. The lions, if you will, or the drivers, they're very dominant style personalities. Let's get things done right now. They're very results oriented people. They can be very blunt, they can be very abrupt. I have a lot of high D in me. I was talking to my daughter's fiance the other day, and I threw a very hard question at him just out of the blue, and he's like, "You really caught me off guard." And my response was, "That's what I do." So people like that can certainly rub people the wrong way if they're not skillful in their strong personality. Drivers or dominant personality styles do not make up the majority of the population on our planet, let alone people in dentistry. Um, Eyes or otters, very talkative, very optimistic. They like attention. Things will work out. Let's just all work together and keep the peace. Playful kind of personalities. Um, Golden retrievers, S's and C's, the analyticals, are very popular in dentistry. S's, let's not rock the boat. They're very trust-oriented people. They're generally pretty calm and laid back. They don't want to be rushed. They don't want to be pressured. Um, Sometimes those can make for good dental assistants, but because they're working right along with you, they're not the ones that are leading the way in the procedure. Um, the beavers or the C's in the disc profile system, very accurate people, very detail-oriented people. They don't like to be wrong, very calculated. This is my son. I have a son that's a pilot, and he's a C. And they want studies. They want to look at the studies and know how things were done. So I had a doctor in the past, and we were talking about this. And after the meeting was over, he says, "I'm going to send you a picture of my employees." And they're all golden retrievers. Everybody just they just want to get along, and they want to chat and be friendly, and everybody's easygoing, and as a result, they didn't get much done. He was kind of frustrated about that. So sometimes it can be very helpful to understand, again, going back to, you know, these C's and S's make up a preponderance of people in dentistry, doctors included. But let me say this about people that are D's. This is your money person. You want somebody strong as a treatment coordinator, somebody strong, especially with collections. So eyes are very helpful at the front. Treatment coordinators that can keep their focus and do a good job presenting treatment, but yet maintain that relationship aspect of practicing is incredibly important. Dentistry is a relationship business, and it's important to have people that are friendly and talkative, but yet don't talk so long that they can't get the job done. Um, all right, hiring continues with where are you going to place your ads? I mean, I get this question all the time. The comments of, I've placed my ads and I'm not sure why this isn't working. What place do I need to place my ad so that I can find the person I want? Please understand something. Excuse me. Placing ads for people is a combination of two things. You got this continuum of your search and that continuum of the employee's search intersecting. And so there could be really good people out there looking when you're not looking, or you could be looking when they're not looking. So it's not as predictable as we might hope for. The reality is that when you need somebody, you need those ads placed. Most common today, Indeed, Princess Staffing out here. Here's a list of other places. You're welcome to screenshot that. Again, the most popular today, still head and shoulders above all, is Indeed. Used to be Craigslist, and I would tell you, Craigslist is still really cheap and people look at it, but I, don't expect a lot, but it's so cheap that you might as well have multiple ads at the same time. I would. Um, Indeed can get a little pricey, depends on how how many features you're looking at. All right, so what to mention in your ad, the type of practice that you've got, the city that you practice in, especially here in Southern California. The commute out here, I drive about 3,000 miles a month and I'm in it. I'm in a lot of traffic, and there are a lot of people that will take a job because they need a job, and then after driving an hour each way for about 3 months, decide that the commute isn't going to work. So I think it's important in the interviewing process to make sure that the question is asked, will this commute work for you on a daily basis? They're not necessarily they may or they may not tell you where they reside, but certainly put the city that you practice in your ad. Is it full-time? Is it part-time? What exactly is the position? A general outline of the responsibilities. Please don't turn an ad into a job description. That's overkill. Um, Necessary skills, necessary meaning by your standards. What type of experience are you looking for, and the range of pay? Again, in the old days, we didn't put range of pay in ads, but now that's part of Indeed as a regular thing. So what is the range of pay that you're willing to pay? The next aspect of ads after running ads is the filtration process. Efficiency and screening is an important part of hiring. I don't think that every single resume you get should be called. Filter the resumes. What's their employment stability look like, or does it look more like employment instability? If they have their address, does it seem like that commute is going to work? If in fact that's relative, sometimes that may not be accurate. Maybe they're moving to the area. Maybe that's an old address. Who knows? What's their experience level? And again, does that satisfy your desires? And what does the resume itself look like? Is it a hot mess? Are there misspelled words? Are there incomplete sentences? Is it a grammatical disaster? Is it organized? Is it put together well? This says a lot about somebody. If they can't put together a strong resume, then I would have doubts. But again, that doesn't always tell the whole picture. I'll be the first to say that. All right. The next aspect of filtering is the telephone interview. So if they pass if you can check the box on the resume, then the next best thing to do is to make a phone call. And 5, 10, 15 minutes, tell them a little bit about the job, find out a little bit about them. What's their grammar like? What's their voice like? What's their personality seem like? Are they attentive to your questions? Do they listen well? Do they articulate their thoughts clearly? Are they too soft? Are they too talkative? Do they sound like they smoke 4 packs a day? Do they sound like the person that's going to represent your practice? And whether that's front or back, I think that there is a sound, and in dentistry, again, we go back to what dentistry is about. It's a service where people are scared for the most part, and we need to do it, and we need to deliver that in a compassionate, kind, friendly kind of atmosphere. And there's a sound to that. There's no question that there's a sound to all that. So if you like what you hear there, then you would bring them in for the personal interview, 20, 30 minutes, a little bit of small talk, describe the job, get into the specifics, the hours that you want. This isn't really about what they need. It's about what you need. And I can appreciate that somebody may not work exactly what you need, but if they want the job, then they're going to be available for what you need. So I think it's important that, again, we go back to know what you're looking for. I've seen a lot of people compromise. They hire somebody that can't work a certain day, and now they're short on that day. So, you make those decisions and be careful about that. You can ask questions about how does their past experience, what's that going to bring to our office? What will you add to our office? Do they have any special skills or ability that are going to bring more to your practice? What do they not like about their last job? Why did they leave their last job? Um, again, this is really about seeing if they're the right fit. And if all that seems good, you may want to consider, the working interview next. But let me pause for just a second here and go back to that questioning and tell you that we have to be very careful today about, you can no longer ask about, their salary history. You can't ask about legal status in the United States. You can't ask about whether they have any felony convictions. You can't ask this on an application or during the interview process. You can ask later, but these are now, employment or EDD laws. So be very conscientious of that as well. So if you want to bring them back for the working interview, this is more common in the front. In the back. I've seen it happen in the front, but certainly is more common for dental assistants and hygienists and even dentists, associates. That would be a paid, whether it's a half day or a full day or several days, especially for hygiene and dental assistants. I think this is really important. I wouldn't just hire somebody without giving them a working interview. For a few days. I think a few days is appropriate. Again, be sure that you pay them. If you don't, you're putting yourself at risk, and you certainly are within your rights to pay them a different wage than the wage that you would pay them if they were hired. Whatever you feel is necessary. And I don't insult somebody by paying them minimum wage, but if you got a hygienist that wants $65 an hour and you want to do a working interview for $50 an hour, I think that's certainly fine. And if they don't want to work for a working interview, and you can communicate that to them, for the working interview, it's $50. We'll talk about your pay afterwards, and I'm open to paying you more. If they don't want to do that for a day or two, that sends a bad signal my direction, personally. So after you've done the working interviews, you make a conditional offer, and then you start doing your homework. You check their references, you do their background checks if you choose, you can check social media sites. What does your instinct say about them? You can sleep on it. You can certainly call previous employers. You can Google the person. It's pretty interesting what pops up on social media about people these days. And then, last but not least, say a few prayers about it before you actually hire them. That can't hurt either. So this is the place that you're digging into their, whether it's a felony conviction or their rate of pay and all that kind of stuff. This is after the conditional offer has been made. So again, this information came straight from a labor attorney. You can't ask those things during the interview or on an application, but you can find out after a conditional offer has been made. Hence the word conditional. Provided I don't find anything that leaps out of your background that's going to contradict with what you've said or contradict, me and what we're representing in our practice, I'd like to offer you a job. And then you do your homework. All right. employment classifications. You've got new employees, you've got temporary employees, you've got regular full-time or regular part-time. There are former employees, there's exempt and non-exempt. So an exempt is a salaried employee. Non-exempt is usually an hourly employee, and you have employees that are W-2'd. And then the reality is that there really are very few employees that fall into the 1099 status. Even doctors, even associates technically should not be. Most labor attorneys would tell you not to 1099 them. You might be able to 1099 their corporation, but the point is that the state of California has come down hard on the misclassification of employees, and the penalties and the price that one pays for not paying matching taxes. Let's get to the bottom of why people do that. That is why they don't want to pay those matching taxes, so they 1099 them, and or they don't pay them overtime. And so the state has really cracked down on that. And I would tell you that with the quantities of wage hour and rest break and meal break and overtime lawsuits that are occurring these days, just be safe, because it's dangerous to try to get around employment taxes or overtime. Word to the wise there. So again, this was some information that came from a labor attorney. What does it mean? Exempt is no overtime. They're salaried. They don't get paid overtime. They're administrative level employees, which is, your office manager. So if you've got an office manager that is truly working with patients all day long, that's pushing the envelope. Can you pull it off? Possibly so. A real exempt employee is more administrative and managerial, and they don't really work as closely with patients. And, when you start talking about practices that have 5, 10, 15 practices, DSOs, and these types of district managers, these are your more exempt salaried type people. The risks associated with classifying someone as an exempt salaried employee is that if they're working right along with the other employees, day in and day out, and they're not given their meal breaks, their rest breaks, and they're not paid overtime, you could lose that battle. So again, I am very conscientious about suggesting to anybody to put someone on a salary, just because of what I've seen. So be very careful about that. Introductory or probationary period. This is the period of time where you're going to take an employee through onboarding or orientation, and you're going to train them. And generally that's about 90 days, but it may be extended at your discretion. Regardless of an introductory period, please understand they work for you. So somebody can work for you for one day and you can fire them and they can go file for unemployment. Understand, that's just the reality of life, especially in California. So California is an at-will state. And what the definition of that is that at-will employment means basically I can come or go not as I please, but I could quit if I want, and you can fire me if I want. Legal principle that allows employers to terminate an employee for any reason, including no reason at all, so long as the employer's justification is not otherwise prohibited under a local, state, or federal law. In other words, I can let someone go, but I can't let someone go because they are of a certain ethnic background, or because they're left-handed, or because they're gay, or because those are, that is not a justifiable reason in the world we live in today. And so that would be grounds for wrongful termination. That would be grounds for a wrongful termination lawsuit. So, but understand that you are within your rights when someone's not working out to say to them, this isn't working out. We're not the right fit for each other, and we need to go our separate ways. And I don't personally feel compelled to suggest any sort of severance pay for somebody like that. I'm of the opinion that severance pay belongs to people that have been with you a long time and deserve severance pay. So Please don't find yourself being held hostage with an employee because you're afraid to let them go. I've spoken to so many doctors through the years that are worried about an employee filing for unemployment. Big deal. You pay into that system with every payroll. That's what you pay unemployment taxes for. And that's what that money builds up for. And I mean, your unemployment rates could go up, I suppose, if you had a tremendous amount of claims against you, but don't fear someone, filing for unemployment. That's what employees do. Okay, titles. Um, Essentially, hygiene coordinators, treatment coordinators, financial coordinators, insurance coordinators, billers, DAs, RDAs, EF, RDA, EF2, RDH. Those are the titles that we have in dentistry. I'm not real. If you need a title, great. But I'm more about, can the person do the job? But certainly, titles do matter. All right, let's move on into compensation. What are you getting? What are you getting for what you're giving? This is a hot topic today. Wages from a profit and loss statement, gross wages, let me say that clearly, gross wages should be in the 25 to 30% range. Now, if you're a doctor that has, 3 dental assistants and you don't have a hygienist, well, your wages aren't going to be that high. If you're a specialist, your wages aren't going to be that high. So this is a full staff here with assistants, hygienists, front, that kind of thing. Benefits are about 4 to 5%, with most of that being matching taxes and some ancillary benefits depending on what someone might give. Compensation. A few points that I want to make about compensation is that you got to be competitive with what's going on in the dental field today. It's very competitive, and I've seen employees that will play both ends against the middle, and it's like, Dr. Song, you're paying me $30 an hour, and I had a work interview and they're offering me 35, and I really don't want to leave you. So what would you like to do? Dr. Song calls me. He says, Scott, what do you think I should do? I say, pay the ransom, because the reality is finding somebody's even harder. So we've got to be competitive, but there is a fair market value to everyone out there. Compensation increases or benefits that you give to people beyond the range of what I call healthy, again, 25 to 30, are going to have to come from the business doing better. Otherwise, it's coming out of your pocket. Because if you're paying 30 plus percentage points in wages and you add to that all the other overhead, you as the owner of the business are going to be the one that's paying predominantly for that, unless your practice is really doing well and you're keeping up with your proper percentages of overhead. Potential increases in rewards are earned. I know people think, the joke which many people miss is I say, just because the big ball of dirt has gone around the big ball of fire doesn't mean that you deserve a big what? And everybody goes, raise. They know what I'm talking about then. So I'm not a big fan of I do think that cost of living raises are appropriate, 1%, 2%. But overall, I'm more of the opinion that, show me you're doing a good job and that you deserve a raise. But the counterbalance to that in 2025 and the market that we work in now is, employees are hard to find. So people are getting raises when they don't even deserve them. Many of them are good workers, but do they deserve max amount of raises? 10%? Come on. So, I'm all for taking good care of good people, but there's a point where it just, it's a sore subject. Believe me, I hear about it regularly. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what I see here in Southern California. If you don't have a pulse on that, hygiene coordinators, that's the person that's, your entry level person into dentistry usually. Maybe they got a few years of experience, but they're predominantly building and maintaining that hygiene schedule. Maybe they confirm appointments in offices that still have charts. They might be pulling and filing charts, answering the phone, that kind of stuff. Not anything real major as it relates to treatment presentation or billing or anything like that. The range is about 18 to 24 these days. treatment coordinators or financial coordinators, 3 to 5 years of experience, or they're getting 23 to 28. 5 to 10 years, they're getting 25 to 30. More than 10 years, I see 30, 35 plus. I saw one the other day that was 50 bucks an hour for the person in the front. And whew, I didn't work with that person. I found this out in a due diligence that I was doing. And what do you think the buyer of that practice was thinking? So again, please understand that these are ranges, and an experience level, and how skillful people are. These are all variables that influence how much money somebody thinks that they're worth, or how much their employer thinks that they're worth. Dental assistants that might have gone to dental assisting school, or maybe didn't. Entry level, $18, $23 an hour. 2 to 5 years of experience, $23 to $26 an hour. More than 5 years of experience, 26 plus. Then we move into RDAs that are 2 to 5 years of experience, getting 26 to 30. More than 5 years, 30, 35. Again, plus, a good RDA. I'm telling you what, a good RDA is worth good money. You guys know this. RDA EF, 2 to 5 years of experience, 35 to 40 bucks. 5 years or more, 40 to 50 plus. And we could make the case for an EF2 getting even more. There aren't as many EF2s as I see EFs, but they command, they've gotten some good training, and they certainly are above and beyond and can do a lot of things. They can free up a dentist's hands for sure, no doubt about that. Hygienists are making 55 to 65. I think the most I've seen, I heard of a lady down in San Diego that was making like 85 an hour. So this is the going rate. I mean, the hygienists coming out of school are asking for this kind of money. And it's not uncommon for hygienists to be asking for 70. That doesn't mean they're getting it. But I think employees are smart enough to know that the job market is in short supply, and they're smart enough to know that if somebody needs me bad enough, I can get more. People aren't stupid. Associates are making 700 to 1,000 a day, or 25 to 35% of adjusted production, whichever's greater. Again, I can show you associates that are making less, and I can show you associates that are making more. This is just kind of a common range that I'm seeing out there. I've seen doctors they'll sell their practice and they'll work back as an associate, and they might make a lot more than this, but again, that is years and years of experience that commands a much higher level of pay, and it also depends on what they're producing. So those are kind of some pay ranges, current pay ranges. When it comes to giving raises, I think 1 to 2% is all I would really give for average. If somebody's below average, we need to talk about what needs to be improved before a raise is going to be given. If they're above average, 3, 4%. If they're really excellent, 5, 6%. In a real state of desperation with a really good employee, I've seen people give 10%. I'm not really opposed to that if the business can afford it. Again, this all goes back to what's your profit and loss statement look like? Are your numbers in order? Are your salaries, are your gross wages at 35% already? Can you really afford to give somebody a 10% raise when you're off the chart with gross wages? We have to be very careful about that. Because again, I'll say when you're spending too much money and your profit and loss is out of whack, you're the one that's not making any money. So that, by the way, is the formula for stress. Working your tail off and not getting what you are due. Benefits, what I see these days, let's talk about sick time first. Full and part-time people get sick time. You can accrue it or you can front load it. I'm of the opinion that accruing it is better, because you wouldn't want to front load 5 days of sick pay to a person who works 1 day a week, like a part-time hygienist. So accruing is a better way to go. The clock starts on their first day of employment, and that employee becomes eligible for that benefit after 90 days. So 5 days is now the law here in California, and there are certain cities within California that that require more. Los Angeles is higher, West Hollywood is higher, and really the best thing to do when either you're buying or you're in this position to need to know is to check with your city just to make sure. I think West Hollywood is like 9 days. I mean, it's crazy. Um, LA, I'm not sure. It might be 6 still. I'm not exactly sure on the number. So the law is that if you're on the accrual method, that these 5 days that one would earn in a year, if they're not used, they roll over to the next year. That is the law, that any unused sick time in a year rolls to the next. So if my sick time bank is 5 days for 2025 and 2026 gets here and I accrue 5 more days, I've got 10, but 10 don't roll over to the third year, only 5. So only 1 year rolls over, the current year rolls over. So people are going to use sick time if they've got sick time. I'm of the opinion that I would offer to pay it out at the end of the year if it's unused. I would want to try to incentivize people to be healthy and to not be sick because if they're going to lose it, they're going to use it. So I think that that's a nice way to handle that personally. Um, Unless you've got a lot of healthy people and a team of 15 or 20 employees, and now you got to pay all this sick time out the last payroll of the year. I had that happen to one client this year, and he was kind of panicked over it. Vacation. Vacation is generally given to full-time people only. The clock starts accruing on their first day. What is most common in Southern California is 1 week after 1 year and a couple of weeks after 2 to 3 years. Some give more. Um, I see a lot of doctors that when they've got employees that have been there 15, 20 plus years, they're taking good care of them and they're giving them 4 or 5 weeks of vacation. Yes, in addition to sick time. Yes, in addition to holidays. So potentially, I mean, right out of the gate, a good employee after a year or a couple of years could be getting easily a month of paid time off when you add up holiday, vacation, and sick. And I was talking to a buyer the other day, and she just had no idea. She couldn't believe it. But that's reality. Can you give more? If you can afford to give more. And again, now we're back to the same question of, take good care of people. And the downside when people go on vacation or they're sick is that you're short staffed and you got to limp along without them. And that's a burden to everybody else. All right. Holidays. Holidays are pretty common in dentistry. I see that they're typically to full-time and part-time people. These are the 6 major that are paid. Typically, it is the 6 major. I've gone into offices from time to time where they have paid something crazy in addition to this, like, the day after Thanksgiving or, President's Day. I mean, 6 is common, and I would really limit it to this personally. With all the other stuff that you're paying out, I think 6 is appropriate. I have something to say about holidays. A couple of stipulations when I'm working with my clients, and we're talking about their policy manuals and specifically the benefits section as it relates to holidays. I would recommend that holidays are only paid if that holiday falls on the workday. So in other words, the holiday is paid if it falls on an employee's scheduled workday. If they're scheduled to work on Saturdays and it falls on a Saturday, great. But if they're not scheduled and the office is closed on Saturdays, then they don't get paid. This is just a stipulation that saves you a little bit. I would only pay the employee their holidays if they have worked their scheduled shift before and after the holiday. I've seen a lot of angling here, meaning the employee. I was in an office one time where we were having a Tuesday morning meeting, and the doctor says to everyone, want to make sure that you guys are all aware that if you didn't work your day before and tomorrow, you're not getting paid for yesterday's holiday. And they looked at him and they said, why are you saying that, doctor? We're all here. And he goes, I'm saying it for the person that's not here. So that person called in sick on Friday, has a weekend, has a holiday on Monday, and then is sick again. So that's what I mean by angling. We're getting 3 paid days. And so, some people are kind of crafty like that. Additional days before and after the holidays are taken off without pay. That would be another stipulation that I would suggest. Because, if somebody's going to, I mean, you can give them sick pay if you want to allow them to use their sick pay, but if they don't have any, then they're taking that time off without pay. So these are just a few stipulations that I would suggest for holiday pay. All right. So let's just recap real quick this paid time off thing, particularly from a legal perspective. From a legal perspective, you are only required in California to pay sick time. That's the only thing that's mandatory. Everything else is optional. Vacation pay is optional. Holiday pay is optional. Dental benefits are optional. But back to paid time off for just a moment. I do strongly suggest that holiday and vacation pay is something that you offer in your benefits package to your employees, because that's what you've got to do to stay competitive. There's just too many people that do it. And if you're not going to offer it, many times people will go find it somewhere else. Most dental practices offer dentistry to their employees. As a general rule, the lab bill's paid by the employees. Be careful in your policy manual that you're specific about what that means. Lab bill's one thing, but what about implant parts? What about the Invisalign lab bill? Be specific enough so that you're not caught in an awkward moment where it wasn't defined and the employees look at you saying, Dr. Song, you never told me that. You never told me I had to pay for my implant parts too. And they're all upset. Health insurance, the Affordable Care Act kind of changed this a little bit, where technically you're not supposed to, pay them a stipend. What you're supposed to do is, if you can offer a group policy, and if they want it, they want it. If they want to opt out, they can opt out. But that's really the way it's supposed to work. I see people that still do this. The workaround that I've seen people do is they give this health insurance bonus. Well, if it's called a bonus, it's a bonus, but you start moving into a specific dollar amount that you're paying people for health insurance, and you're kind of outside the lines when it comes to the Affordable Care Act. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that. Retirement, you do have to have some sort of self-funded instrument. Retirement plans are mandatory for most employers in California. So if you're an employer with at least one employee, you must register with CalSavers, the state retirement savings program. If you have your own, that's what a lot of people will do. So hypothetically, Dr. Song has his own retirement account, and he offers this type of retirement plan to the employees as well. Let me be clear. You do not have to fund that. The requirement is not that you fund it. The requirement is that you have an instrument in place so that they can save for themselves. Because a few years ago, somebody got pretty smart and realized that people aren't going to make it on Social Security and Medicare much longer. So you got to have something in place for them to self-fund. If you want to take advantage of the types of retirement plans that allow for a lot of savings for yourself, then talk to a financial planner, because you can save a lot of money by paying a little bit of money in terms of their matching. That is very common with a wise financial planner. If you're barely making ends meet in the first 5 years of your practice, don't bother fooling around with this right now until you get to those profit years of your practice, to where you can really start doing this. But it is a good thing to do when you're trying to save for yourself. So I would recommend you talk to a financial planner about that. If you don't have a financial planner, I do have a friend of mine who works with a lot of dentists. His wife is a dentist, and he does a lot of financial planning for dentists. You can text me if you would like his name and information. All right, bonuses. Let me say something about bonuses. A bonus is a reward that is earned for obtaining consistent results that are caused by additional effort. That's what a bonus system really is, in my opinion. I don't think that employees with really bad attitudes deserve a regular bonus system. I really don't. I think that the attitude's got to be right. There's got to be a great spirit of cooperation and a willingness and a lot of effort being put forth to do what we're attempting to do in our business. And then keep in mind, you reserve the right to take it away. The business has got to be able to afford to give a bonus. You can be in that 25 to 30% range for your salaries, but what we have to do when we're talking about the bonus is establish our break-even number. Let me get to that slide in just a moment. I want to speak to something really important. That's why this is in red. I've had doctors that I've worked with say, all right, I'm going to buy this practice and I'm going to motivate all these people to really work a lot harder because I'm going to put a great bonus system in place. Let me tell you what, you could tell me that you're going to pay me $500 million to be a great basketball player, and I am absolutely incapable of that. It's not about the amount of money. Please understand that bonus programs don't turn average employees into superstars. That's just not the way it works. That's why a bonus is a reward for something that they're working hard for because we've made our numbers. So it's kind of, in my opinion, a backwards idea to really believe that people are going to start going above and beyond and start producing and start working really hard because you offer a bonus system. There are a few people in the world that are motivated like that by money, but many times people can't do any better than the tools that you as their employer have given them, the systems that you've trained them on, the coaching that they've been given, the training that they've been given. So be careful about that one. So to give a bonus, you got to understand your break-even point. Now we're back to the profit and loss statement. You got to review that every 90 days because things can change. All of a sudden your compressor goes out and your break-even changed for a few months unless you paid cash for it. But if you paid cash for it, please amortize that back into the P&L and recoup that money. It shouldn't, I don't think that you're going to continue to pay the bonus at the same level when you've had to outlay a large sum of money that really is a business expense. So you got to really understand your break-even point fairly well. Everybody understands? Raise your hand if you don't understand what that means. Any hands, Jonathan? What break-even means? Okay. I can't see the full screen, so just let me know if there was. So you got to reevaluate it every 90 days. And sometimes you have to reevaluate the bonus itself. So you're sharing essentially a portion of the overage. I believe strongly in using rolling averages for that calculation because month in and month out, you can have a really good month in collections one month, but that's because you had a great month in production last month. And so we have to be careful about that 1 month at a time thing. And again, I'll say bonuses need to be reevaluated. The same old carrot doesn't motivate after a while, so you got to mix it up from time to time. I've seen tiered bonus systems. I've seen percentages over X, meaning the break-even point. Maybe give the team 25, 30% of the overage. I've seen departmental goal type systems set up those types of bonus systems. We have the goals for hygiene, we have goals for assistance, we have goals in the front, and certain goals being met generate certain amounts of money. I do think that one of the fairest ways to do something like that is to share that equally because, everybody really does have a hand in how well a dental practice does. They're not, some people think that it's all about the collections, but the reality is dentistry is sold in the back, for lack of a better word. I hate the word sell, but if patients aren't educated well in the back, then they don't schedule up in the front. We can't collect at that point. I've seen individual achievement bonuses. I even worked with a guy one time that handed a sealed envelope to all of his employees, and every time he would give it to them, he'd say the same thing. You tell anybody what's in this envelope, you'll never see another envelope. So it's really up to you how you choose to do it. I've helped a lot of doctors through the years develop bonus systems, and it's nice to be able to afford to give one, no doubt about that. Whoops. Um, be careful of something when it comes to bonuses paid at year end. They become expected. So, it's Christmas. I'm going to give everybody their $1,000 bonus. Well, next Christmas, you're having a bad year and you don't feel like you can afford that. They're still expecting it. So I'm more of a believer in giving holiday gifts and having a holiday party and having a bonus system that's in place instead of giving a monetary Christmas bonus or year-end bonus. All right. Compensation continues with overtime. Please understand that your employees may not necessarily be entitled to work overtime, but if they do, you must pay for that overtime. That is the law. It's paid in excess of 8 hours a day. It's paid at the rate of time and a half. And if it's over 12 hours, I think it's 2 times, but we don't have 12-hour shifts in dentistry. Oh, there it is right there. Double the pay for 12 hours. Meal and rest breaks. This is big stuff, guys. One meal break of at least 30 minutes. Again, if you're out of state, I don't know what other states are, but California is at least 30 minutes for every 5 hours. If the employee works no more than 6 hours, the meal can be waived. I wouldn't get in. It does need to be in writing, but I wouldn't do this on a regular basis. I just kind of discourage that just because it borderlines on the edge of putting yourself in a vulnerable position. Rest breaks are a 10-minute rest break for every 4 hours. Employees who work 3.5 hours or less are not entitled to rest breaks. And there's nothing deducted. Rest breaks are self-managed. That needs to be very clear in your policy manual. You can't manage that as a working dentist. So they need to be self-managed and they need to check out with someone. So as I said earlier, overtime, meal, and rest break violations are just about the most common lawsuit that I see dentists dealing with these days. My advice to you is be very, very conscientious about paying overtime, keeping proper time records, making sure they take their meal breaks, their rest breaks. This is a big deal. It's very costly. You get burned once, and then you're going to police it for the rest of your career. All right, responsibilities and expectations. That really comes in the form of, it begins, your expectations, should I say, as communicated to the employee, begin in a policy manual. A policy manual is that book, that document that describes various legal requirements, your protocols, your policies, the decisions of your individual practice. Please do not think that you're going to buy a practice and just take over the seller's policy manual. Please don't think that you can just call Dr. Song here and ask him for his policy manual. Because the reality is that policy manuals are like wardrobes. We've all got different things, and you all don't necessarily have the same opinion about all of the various policies that should be or could be in a policy manual. This is I've got 2 slides that are going to show you a list of all of the things that I recommend. These are pages out of my book on policy manuals, and these are all various topics that I think are important. And as you can see, what we were talking about a few moments ago, lunch breaks, rest breaks, overtime, keeping time records. These are all very important policies to be very clear on, so that when your employee starts working for you and they're going through that onboarding stage, they're given an opportunity to understand very clearly what your expectations of them are, along with all of this other stuff. I mean, it can take a while to customize a manual, but I can tell you it's really important to do so. So what do? You either hire a labor attorney and spend, $1,500, $2,000 plus having them do it for you, or you work with your HR or your payroll company. HR for Health, I think, does a pretty good job of this. ADA and TDIC all have copies that they give to their members that can be customized. This is where you begin. But the laborious part of it is to sit down and take the time to do it. Because if you don't take the time to do it, I can tell you, there are going to be moments where if these decisions were not made in advance on these touchier emotional subjects like benefits or paid time off or whatever, it may not be a problem until that employee gets upset and now you have a problem. Let me give you one example of this. I worked with a doctor years ago and he put in the policy manual that the holiday had to fall on a business workday or the employee wasn't paid. And for 5 years, Monday through Friday, that employee got that paid holiday. I think it was July 4th. And then the 6th year, July 4th, fell on the Saturday. And so the following pay period, the employee comes storming into the doctor's office and she slams down her paycheck stub and says, "You didn't pay me for July 4th." And he said, "I'm not supposed to pay you for July 4th." And she threw a big fit and got real upset. And he pulled out the manual and he pulled out the piece of paper that she had signed where she acknowledged having read the manual. And he said, "This hadn't changed in 6 years." It was over. The conversation was over. And so, you don't want to be in that position where you didn't have that clause in there. And now you're like, "I don't think it's fair to pay you." And they're like, "Well, you've paid me every time." And everybody's assuming. So be careful. I don't want this picture to be you in the crime scene because you didn't communicate. A clear, well-written manual I'm telling you, it will reduce the awkward moments that will arise in the future. All you got to do is give it enough time. Dr. Song, with the nod of your head, have you experienced these awkward moments? Yes, they occur. I'm sure most of you have. If you're not a practice owner yet, then by the way, with a show of hands, are there any people here that are not practice owners yet? Any show of hands? Dr. Song, do you see any?
Actually, most of them are not practice owners.
Okay, well, good. Then I'm giving you some
Actually,
important.
yeah, one guy, yeah.
Okay, good. I'm sharing some good stuff then because this is about prevention here. I mean, you're dentists, you're all about prevention, I hope. All right, so have your employees sign that they've read and they've received the manual. I don't care if they agree with it. I don't care if they like it. It's your business. You do it the way you want to do it. All right, the next aspect of clarifying responsibilities and expectations is job descriptions. You begin. By the way, don't buy a practice by going in and slapping down new job descriptions for people that already do the job. I mean, most people don't even respect that, Begin by providing more of a general list. What I do with my clients is in my book, I have lists of hygiene coordinator tasks, treatment coordinator, financial coordinator, dental assistants, hygienists. I have lists of very common tasks. And I would say, begin with this list and then allow your employees to look at this list. And generally what I do is we go through them item by item, making sure that everything is covered and that everything is assigned to someone, that someone is the backup or the number two person, whatever you want to call it, because generally there's a lot of cross training and tasks that are shared, like answering the phone, So allow employees to modify them, review them, finalize them, and make sure that everything that needs to be done in your practice is within someone's job description. And that might be yours as well. Then after you've gotten that all defined, you've added their name, their title, their wage, the hours and days that they're supposed to work. And now you've got a very clear description of what they get in exchange for that paycheck. And you've got a very important tool when it comes to the job performance review. Another aspect of clarifying responsibilities and expectations is whether some tasks are measurable. There are a lot of measurable things, but what do you measure? I keep a lot of stats with my clients, and this is just a picture of what I call the scoreboard, which is a way of monitoring certain things, monitoring tasks that are within recall and how recall drives hygiene, hygiene drives restorative, hygiene and restorative drives production, production drives collections, collections drives net. That's on your profit and loss. That's not necessarily what I don't suggest sharing that with your employees. So keeping stats, I think is important, having goals, very specific goals, goals that can be measured. So in the front, some examples of that are hygiene patients that are called, hygiene patients that are spoken to, appointments that have been made, what the hygiene fill rate is, over-the-counter collections, accounts receivable over 90 days, claims that are sent, one that has the ability to schedule to goal most days, confirming appointments, uncompleted treatment system. This is all black and white, in my opinion. There's nothing subjective about this. This is all measurable and trackable. And, when a doctor is busy in the back doing dentistry all day long and they don't have any systems and they don't have any meetings and they don't have any ways of monitoring, I've met and worked with many doctors who are kind of clueless about what's going on up in the front. And you don't want to be in that position because that's generally not, it's not a good place for an owner to be lost. In the back, rooms that are set up properly, keeping costs for dental supplies within the budget, maintaining proper inventory levels, participating as expected in what I call patient interviews, those conversations with patients, handing off to the doctor consistently taking x-rays and photographs, confirming treatment that's being performed on patients as they're being seated, looking for concerns or problems before the doctor comes in. Be careful, don't misinterpret that as diagnosing. That's not what I'm saying. Hygienists that are consistent with their perio charting. Again, these are all very, very detailed and can be very defined standards of performance with your employees. Systems, well, I could talk for a year about systems, but there are lots of systems in place. And here are just a few examples: recall, uncompleted treatment, scheduling, financial, how we handle broken appointments, goals and stats, the new patient experience, chart documentation, patient interviews, handoffs, treatment presentations, records that we take regularly, whether they be x-rays, photos, probing, exams, equipment, maintenance, dental supplies, how we set up rooms, sterilization standards, our meetings. These are all very important systems. Systems are very important in a dental practice. I've worked with people for a period of time and we've, year, 2 years, we go through all this stuff and they're like, okay, we're finished. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm finished, but you're not. You're never finished. The reality is, just like this bridge, if you know anything about the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, it is in a constant state, that's a better choice of words, continual state of maintenance. This bridge is being painted at some place all the time. Maybe not at night, of course. And we have to kind of look at our practice systems like that. If you are not reviewing your systems regularly, then they just become something that we used to do. I've seen that happen so many times. So all of the things, by the time you circle back from front office to back office to marketing to, the patient experience, I mean, maybe a year goes by and then it's time to do it again. And by the way, we make refinements to these systems. We make refinements to our strategies. We have to review for new employees. There are multiple reasons that this should never stop. It just can't stop. Otherwise, those systems fall apart. I've seen it too many times. So where do we do this? Where do we communicate all this business about systems? Well, meetings is the answer to your question, and I've worked with doctors that get out of dental school or they buy a practice and they're like, a meeting? I don't really want to have any meetings. Or doctors that have worked with their employees for a long time and they're afraid to have meetings. If we have meetings, then they might start complaining. So, you may feel as ill-equipped at communicating with your employees. Well, I'll say and I don't know whether you felt this way, but how I felt when my first son was born. And it was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? The nurse, it was the great care for my wife in that 24 hours. And the nurse rolls her out in the wheelchair to the car, gets my wife in, gets the baby in the car seat, shuts the doors very quietly. And then she looks over the hood of the car at me and she's like, good luck. And I'm like, where's the owner's manual? And I was a little bit lost with my first child. I had to embrace this new responsibility. And I had to learn what I didn't know. How are you supposed to know what you don't know? Well, I had to find out. I had to find out through experience. And I found myself in hopeless moments where especially my daughter would not stop crying. Okay, you change them, you feed them, you burp them. They've got, what is the problem? They're not sick. And then there were moments that I wasn't even thinking about being problematic that arise. And it's like, oh my gosh, I wasn't expecting that. Let me tell you what, I showed up and I put my time in. And I went to Tiny Mite Soccer, and my son's first word was ball. And he played with that soccer ball and played club soccer. And then he played for a very prominent high school football team. And then he went to college. And you know what? I put my time into it. I showed up. I showed up at dance recitals. I showed up at dance competitions. I showed up. I showed up and I would complain to my wife, do we have to sit through this again? But I showed up. And I showed up on camping trips, and I showed up at what in those days was called the YMCA Indian Guides program. I showed up. That's what I did. And I did the best that I could. And I got them all off the payroll. I got them all off the payroll. And I'm telling you guys, the analogy here is the same thing that I'm suggesting that you're doing with your employees. You may feel very ill-equipped at it, but you might not know what to do. But I'm going to tell you what, the commitment to routine time makes a difference. And if any of you either think back to your childhood or you have children, you understand that leadership is spelled Time. And that's how we do it. We pour ourselves into what might not seem normal or comfortable, even if we don't know how to do it, and we show up. Where do you show up? Well, you show up in meetings. You have a morning meeting, and meetings are designed with different agendas. And this agenda is to talk about the day in front of us. It's to talk about a little bit about yesterday. It's to talk and make sure that the lab cases are back, not for today, but 2 days from now. It's to talk about quick stats in the office. It's to get everybody on the same page. It's to suddenly figure out where we need to bob and weave based on what's happening in our schedule or who didn't come to work or something like that. It's a very important daily meeting. And I've listened to all kinds of excuses about why some people don't feel like they can have morning huddles because, well, I stagger my schedule because of overtime and excuse. If there's a will, there's a way. You can have a huddle at the end of the day for the next day. You can have a huddle in the middle of the day for the next day. You can have huddles. By the way, you can structure your employees' hours any way you want. So there are multiple solutions to most problems. You have team meetings where we regularly, how often is that? That's at least, once or twice a month, where we go over stats in the practice. We keep people abreast of their concerns. We allow them to have, there's something posted where they can write things down that they have concerns about or whatever their agendas are that they want to talk about. The marketing concept, the training, the retraining, as I said, reviewing systems. This is a very simple template for an agenda for a team meeting that will keep you busy forever. It's a very simple format. And there's always something in those numbers, those quadrants to talk about. Performance reviews. Performance reviews are where we give that individual feedback. Everybody wants to know. Even you as dentists want to know how you're doing. I want to know how I'm doing. And I don't always like what I hear. And you may not like what you hear all the time, but we need feedback. Employees need feedback. That is not the time where don't avoid performance reviews because you don't want to give a raise. That's not the reason. Performance reviews are about letting people know where they're doing well and letting people know where there's room for improvement. And when you do these performance reviews, there's a few documents that can really help you. Not only the job description, the performance evaluation form, stats, if they're measured, standards of performance, if they've been defined, employee performance records, meaning write-up forms or commendations, and the employee attendance record, as well as time records. These are all components of things that could be discussed, especially when there are tardiness issues, attendance issues, problems that have been documented and discussed, because these all lend themselves to areas that need to be improved. Stats can, again, good and bad. So don't just go into a performance review without anything other than, the time that you're giving to it. Be prepared. What I usually do is give the employee the evaluation form first and have them fill it out on themselves, turn that back into you, and then schedule the performance review so that you have time to see how do they see themselves? Because some people may think more of themselves than they really are. And if their numbers are high and yours aren't that high, you need to come into that review with some very specific information about, this is why you are the score that I'm giving you. Be very specific. And then sometimes I've seen people that are giving low scores just because they don't really like somebody, and their low scores are unfounded. So, be fair. Be fair with employees. It goes a long way. Being fair goes a long way. There's the monthly accounts receivable meeting. I mean, every doctor wants to know if somebody paid or why there's a money problem. You don't need to spend time in the team meetings talking about all the money issues if you'll have a monthly accounts receivable meeting. A standing meeting, I would say after statements go out, a week or so after statements go out, where you review the accounts that are over 90 days, you clean up old balances, you review unpaid claims, you review periodically. You don't have to review this every month, but at least once a quarter, review adjustments and write-offs, discounts that have been given. You got to keep your nose into this money part of it, because if you don't, I've seen embezzlement happen more times than we would want to talk about. So you gotta understand it and you gotta stay on top of it. And so the monthly accounts receivable meeting with those that are involved is a standing meeting, in my opinion. So we've covered the daily huddle, we've covered the team meetings, we've covered the performance review meetings, and we've covered the accounts receivable meetings. Those are generally what I recommend in most offices. If there are partners or associates, there should be periodic doctors meetings as well to talk about whether it's cases or other things that apply to what's going on in the practice, the clinical components of procedures that are being done or new procedures that we're going to start offering. I just think it's important to meet, how often is necessary. It depends on how things are running with you and your associates or partners. So continuing education is the continuation of those meetings. And I think CE is important. This is where you go learn more than what you have the ability to just do with your employees on your own. So whether it's clinical that you're after and you're taking employees there with you to learn, or if you're bringing that back and sharing that with them, or it's the business side of things. There are lots of clinical CE courses. There are lots of coaches. I say lots. I mean, I don't run into a lot of people that do what I do for a living. I have a better chance of running into a dentist. But, there are certainly a number of resources for doctors to have in terms of coaching clinically and from the business side. So growth and development. I've talked to doctors who have said to me through the years that just seems like a lot of meetings. That's a lot of meetings to be having. Well, if we did the math on it, 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes a day for a huddle meeting, 30 minutes to an hour for the accounts receivable meeting once a month, 1 or 2 1-hour meetings a month for the whole team, and 1 or 2 performance review meetings a year. Let's call that an hour. What are you talking about? An average of about 5 hours a month that's spent in meetings. And I'm going to tell you, my experience has been my entire career that owners who put time into meetings with their employees, those practices grow. They grow. People do better because this is where you work on the business. You go do dentistry, you're working in the business. You know, that football player, actually both of those boys of mine played football, and you know, football players practice. Now I'm not talking about professional, but I know when I was watching my son practice 200 days a year to play in 16 games a year. And you guys are working every day. And I guess that's why it's called the practice of dentistry. Never mind. That's a bad joke. Um, you know, where do you stop the clock? Stop the handpiece, stop the phone, gather together and work on the business. Don't underestimate what that produces, because that's how you rally a team. That's how you get people on the same page. That's how you do so many things that when meetings aren't held, I've watched a lot of doctors who find themselves being continually interrupted with questions, and they almost always come at the wrong time. All right. Leadership. All right. Here's the fun part, guys. I'm sorry to hit you with this last, but let me say to you, everything that goes on in your practice is your responsibility. That is the bottom line. That's a big pill to swallow, but I just have to be real honest about it. I mean, everything that goes on in my business is my responsibility. And if it's somebody else that did it, I'm the boss. Somebody that did it in your office, you're the boss. That's why it's your responsibility. That doesn't mean that you're directly responsible, but ultimately, if it isn't dealt with, and if it happens again, you know that old saying, first time, shame on you, second time, shame on me. So, you know, leadership, employee management and communication starts with leadership. I like this picture right here. I'm not bossy, I just have better ideas than you. So what is that? What is leadership? You know, understand that as a leader, you set the tone in your practice. Your habits, your appearance, your demeanor, your attitude toward everything in your practice sets the tone. I have worked with doctors that, let me give you an example. An employee that has said to me, you know, Scott, we probably ought to drop that insurance plan. And the doctor says, no, 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 we can't drop that insurance plan, because if we drop that insurance plan, then we're gonna lose all those patients. And the next thing you know, everybody on that team has become convinced, because their doctor has said that no, we can't drop plans because we'll lose the patients. And I find it fascinating how people, I'm talking about all of us, we can get stuck in these ruts of believing what we believe and never changing. And I've been in too many offices where we've changed things, and people have looked at me and said, I just really didn't think that was possible. I can't believe that we're collecting initial payments to reserve long appointments. Our patients would have never done that in the past. And I'm like, well, in the past, we used to do dentistry and send a bill. Things have changed, you know, but understand they're watching you first. Again, we go back to the analogy of children. You know, when I was raising my kids, I tried very hard not to swear around my kids. You know, I mean, I can sound like a sailor, if I'm with all the guys, but let me say this. Raising my children, I worked very hard. And by the time my kids were even 12, 13 years old, the worst word that they knew was stupid. And they're like, Dad, he said stupid. And I'm thinking, wow, I hope that's the worst thing that ever comes out of his mouth. They watch us. Our employees watch us just like our children, or maybe the way you watched your parents. So our employees are watching. Let me talk about a few helpful leadership traits. Create a culture of accountability. Create the kind of culture where people know that they're going to be held responsible and they know that you are willing to be held responsible. Let me tell you, better practice what you preach here when it comes to this stuff. Have due dates, have deadlines for things that need to be done. Monitor what's happening in your practice. If you don't monitor it, then it can fizzle or it can get worse, depending what it is. Be consistent as a leader with your follow through. That's a big deal. You can't just be on people because you're upset because we're having a few bad months. You got to be consistent. That's a killer. Inconsistency is a killer. You need to really truly understand what your employees do. You can tell somebody that it's their job to work in the front, but if you don't take enough interest and have enough conversation with your employees to understand what they're really doing, then you're in the dark and things can go sideways. So I strongly recommend that you really understand, not because I want you to do it, because it needs to be managed properly. When we show genuine respect and kindness to people, that takes us much further in life. Patients fall into that category as well. Take the time to understand your employees. Take the time to listen to your employees. When people everybody goes through rough patches in life. And when somebody's in a rough patch or somebody's, not behaving as they normally would, pull them aside at the end of the day and take the time to just say, is everything okay? You don't seem yourself. And this isn't about ripping into somebody because they were in a bad mood. This is about genuinely caring and taking time to understand where they're coming from. As I've said to you, work on the business together with your team. Be involved. Don't be an absentee dictator. Be involved in what's going on. Be involved with your employees. Be involved with conversations. Be involved with trying things. And last but not least, please, as I said before, be respectful, be kind. Our world is becoming stranger and stranger as the years go by. And I don't know if there's enough love and kindness that we show each other. Certainly not on the freeways in Southern California, that's for sure. A few things that are pretty detrimental. First of all, not speaking the same language as your employees. Oh my gosh. Believe me, it happens. I have a client right now that comes to mind that they all speak Spanish and he speaks Korean and he speaks terrible English and he doesn't understand a lot of things they say. And it's very challenging for all of them to work together. And so I'm not saying that he can't pull it off. I'm saying it just makes it a lot harder. So not speaking their language is a barrier. It's a takeaway, not an add to. Changing your mind as an owner too frequently is a big barrier to effective leadership because when people understand that that's how their boss is, they come to pretty much rely on the fact that whatever he's talking about now, a month from now, it'll be dust under the rug. Nobody will care. He'll even forget about it. She'll even forget about it. So please understand that changing your mind frequently is very dangerous. It's a very dangerous leadership trait. Not giving new ideas or employees a real chance. I always use the expression, give it a real college try. What that means is, some ideas need to be tried for 6 months to a year before you can really assess, how good they are. I'll use Dr. Song. I'll put you out on a limb here for a moment and say, Dr. Song, after you placed your very first implant, did you know that you were really good or really bad at it? No, probably not either, because you have to do things for a while, and you have to learn from the mistakes and new ideas and new employees. I've seen doctors hire employees, and after, 2 or 3 weeks, I don't like her. I'm getting rid of her. She's not any good. Well, why is she not any good? Well, I don't like this or that. And they didn't really even give them a fair chance. I don't give up too soon on ideas or people. And please don't be so impatient. Um, I can be impatient at times. And I'll tell you, in my career as a coach, I've learned to be very patient. By the way, can anybody guess why I'm very patient as a dental coach? Because I'm being paid. Be patient with your employees. Allow people to make mistakes. Talk to the problem. Don't attack the person. I've seen leaders fail, or I've seen people appear as less of a strong leader because their focus is more on money instead of why we're really in the business of dentistry. If dentistry is a commodity to you, I personally believe that that's actually going to hold you back, because I believe that most people that get into dentistry do so because we want to serve people. We want to help people. And it's really about that purpose. The money comes, the money takes care of itself usually. But when there's too big of a focus on money and it's all about the money, I think that makes us less effective leaders. Here's a big one: micromanaging people. People don't like to be micromanaged. What that does is stifle people. They're afraid to make mistakes. They never blossom, you know. It breeds ill will and resentment. And there's generally a turnstile of employees that are coming and going because of Dr. Micromanager. Be careful. It's also a barrier to effective leadership when we expect people to do all of what we want them to do without really following through and talking about it and participating in it. And again, I'll take you back to meetings. That's where you participate. That's where you communicate. That's how we become more effective, instead of just barking orders and telling people I want it done with no knowledge of how it's supposed to be done. Attitudes are contagious when it comes to leadership. Please understand, their attitude will often be a reflection of yours. So if you're all about improving and doing better and they don't buy into your philosophy, they're probably going to move on, or they're probably going to get fired. Or if the opposite of that is when I've seen really strong, skillful people that work in a dental office leave offices because the doctor was just not enough for them. They cared more about the practice than what the doctor appeared to care about: the business, about the communication, about the flow, about the teamwork. There's backbiting and quibbling among employees, and the doctors just want to run in their office and hide from it. And they get upset because they're working for somebody who doesn't want to get involved. And they just leave. I've seen really talented people leave not so good leaders. So please be aware that your attitude is going to be contagious and it's going to rub off on your employees. I hope that is worth catching. And finally, let me end on this. Look at this. We got 15 minutes for questions, if there are any. You're the leader of the pack, Doc. Each one of you. Your actions and your time investment into these matters of employee management will influence the development, or they will influence the challenges or problems of employee management. don't worry about having all the answers. Don't worry about doing it right every time. Just pour yourself into it and show up, and it'll get better. Um, that's been my experience. Let me say this before I open it up for questions. If you have a practice and you want to explore the possibilities of improving, um, text me your name and the word evaluation, and we can talk about what that would look like. I don't charge for practice evaluations, but we need to talk about your practice first and where you are and all that kind of stuff to arrange it. If you have questions about anything I've talked about tonight, you're certainly welcome to text me your questions. I think that's about all I have to say about that. As I did say, I do help dentists that are buying practices with due diligence. If that is something that you're interested in, when you have a practice in mind or you're looking at a practice and you want to understand what kind of an offer to make, or, keep my name and number. Happy to talk to you. All right, let's open it up for questions. I see a few in the chat. Have you been monitoring those, Jonathan?
Yeah, I got one from Alex here.
Okay.
It's about the employee benefit. Does health insurance have to be provided to part-time employee?
Does it have to be?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, his question is if it's provided to the full-time, does it also apply to
You
part-time?
you could stipulate that that benefit is only for full-time people. You can control it. But let me say this, I'm not a labor attorney. I want to be very clear about that. I think that if that is something that you're considering offering, it would be very wise to talk to a labor attorney and make sure that what I told you is correct. That's my answer.
Is there like a specific, like a best fit disc profile per team members of dental office? I guess the owners are usually D's.
No, the owners generally aren't D's,
They're
believe it
not D.
or not.
Oh, really?
No. I would tell you that probably 80% of the people that I see in dentistry are S's and C's from the disc
Oh,
profile. Um, it's nice to have D's when it comes to whoever's collecting money, but understand that there's a downside to that too, because if they're too strong in their personality, they're going to just piss people off.
yeah.
And so, they're going to butt heads with other employees. And so somebody who's got a level of maturity and experience, years bring wisdom, and wisdom generally teaches us to keep our mouth shut more. And people that are D's, that are calculated and very professional, can do very good in those treatment coordinator and billing positions. But people that are like wild Mustangs, sometimes they can create more problems. The I personality for treatment coordinators and hygiene coordinators can be very helpful, because whoever's answering the phone and whoever's greeting your patients that have, that, I don't want to say that cheerleader personality, but that extroverted, friendly, social kind of personality. My wife is like that. They make the best hostess at the party, because they mingle with everybody and mix with everybody, and they just make people feel good. But if you get two eyes working together up in the front, they can talk too much.
Yeah.
So, again, pros and cons, but your S's and C's generally have a tendency to make up most of the people, particularly people in the back. And I don't know, is that because of the science of dentistry? I'm not sure exactly, but I've participated in enough personality profiles of people in dentistry to know that, and the people that also understand the disc system, that S's and C's make up a lot of people in dentistry. So I don't know if I have more of an answer than that.
Basically, it kind of depends, and it's more of a combination.
It is. It's nice to have a combination of people, you know. I mean, if they're all the same, I mean, you want to have people also that make up for what you aren't. You know, if you're not a real social kind of extroverted person with your patients, you can make up for that by having employees that are. That's not to say you can't talk to them, but you know, you definitely want to have your patients interact more with your employees than you as a doctor. So it's important to have very engaging employees, people that are interested. But again, draw a line at some point because we got a job to do. We can't visit the whole time.
One more question from Dr. Chen. How to fire an underperforming employee without a backlash?
Well, again, I'll go back to California's in an at-will state. So backlash. First of all, if you want to do this in an appropriate way, I don't think anybody should be fired and it should be a surprise to them. I think that's an unfair termination, you know, unless it was something gross, you know, stealing, coming to work under the influence, you know, verbally accosting a patient or an employee. But let me say this. Let's say somebody's having an attendance problem or they're underperforming in some way. The first thing that you do is, you know, you review their job description, and then you might review your standards of your expectations. And then you give them a verbal warning that this has been reviewed, and you give them and you let them know that if this doesn't get corrected in X amount of time, you know, generally it depends on what we're talking about, right? That it could be grounds for another write-up and it could affect their continued employment. And then if it happens again, you write them up and then you tell them if it happens again, you're going to lose your job. And I think that process of what I call progressive discipline is a very fair way of doing it. Um, so I think that if the backlash, what does backlash mean? I mean, somebody's going to go file for unemployment if they get fired, big deal. You know, is somebody going to sue you because you fired them because they missed work too much or because they couldn't perform? I doubt it. You know, I mean, you can sue somebody, but winning is another story. So, is there another specific part of that question that doctor would like to ask about?
Does the write-up meetings require their signatures? And what happens if they refuse to sign it?
When writing someone up, yes, I would ask for their signature. My write-up form in my book has the doctor's signature and the employee signature, and I would have a witness signature on there as well. And so an employee can refuse to sign, but that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. So if I was going to write somebody up, I would probably always have a witness with me in this world that we live in today, the way people are. I think it would be wise to have, whether that's an office manager or another doctor or, you know, somebody there, excuse me. And I would have that person there would sign that the employee refused to sign and the witness signs. But just because they don't sign doesn't negate the write-up.
So it's happened, they just haven't accepted. I mean, you have
Yeah.
one.
I do have one more thing that I want to say about that. You know, I tell my clients to keep what I call the employee log, you know, whether that's, sorry about,
Okay,
not sure what happened, but let me finish what I was saying.
sure.
The employee log, because there can be things that happen that we forget about, you know. I spoke to Mary about coming in late, and the
Got
next thing you know, it's
it.
like, I've talked to Mary 4 times about this, but I don't remember when that was. That log or that Word document, which is just a trailing day by, that doesn't mean you have to write something every day. That just means whenever there's something memorable that is something I spoke to an employee about, good or bad, um, you know, that information might be helpful. So please, I would recommend that's just a common practice of employee management. Again, I never said tonight that employee management was easy. Any other questions?
I think that's it. I was actually wrapping it up while you got disconnected, but thank you so much, Scott, for coming in today. wealth
Yep,
of knowledge. I'd like to bring you back. I'll put you on the spot here for other,
sure.
I know you have wealth of knowledge, so hopefully we can get you back for other topics. Everybody, if you have any more questions, please reach out to Scott personally. He will be a great help for you. And then I'll see you guys again probably next month with some other topics. But I'll get you guys posted. Thank you so much.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.